Hey, this morning we have just a special treat. Good friends Jim and HK are here with us. They came about 2.5 years ago, something like that. What day was it?
Sunday, January 8th.
Yep. So
And y'all actually had a combined service. Instead of having two services that day, y'all just had one.
so he remembers much better than I do. And so I've got to know them over the last couple of years, and just an extraordinary story. This past week I was at a youth camp, and I was talking to them about how God takes our uh-ohs and turns them into woohoos. If you look at the cross and the empty tomb, that's what happens. God takes our difficulties and brings it to victory. And so their story is a story like that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim and HK so that they can tell you about what God has done in their life.
Okay. Good morning, Grace Point Church.
Good morning.
I am HK Derryberry. This is my good friend and mentor, Mr. Jim Bradford.
Good morning.
We are very honored to be here today. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. We are very honored to be here. We hope our presentation will be motivational and highly inspirational. I realize the importance of starting these worship services on time, but I was afraid we were going to be late getting here this morning. Traffic on the road from the hotel was bumper to bumper. And I was driving Mr. Jean's white GMC pickup truck as fast as I could to get here today. And
Jean and Linda were screaming.
we finally made it though. Only problem is all you members of Grace Point Church took all the parking places. So I couldn't find a place to park my vehicle. So when you leave church today, if any of you see a white GMC pickup truck, please let me know. That just might be my vehicle. You may not realize by looking at me, I have some disabilities. I am blind and I have cerebral palsy. So I can't do all the things that you, your children, maybe even grandchildren can do. It doesn't keep me from wanting to do those things. I even dream of doing those things that people have told me all my life I could never do with my disabilities. Like many of you, I love sports. I've always wanted to play sports. I figure with my disabilities, I'll never have the opportunity. But just in case the opportunity ever presents itself, like your worship minister, Mr. Blake Gosnell, I've always tried to stay in great tip-top physical condition. For the past 3 years, my Blake Gosnell exercise routine includes I wake up every morning at 5 a.m. Try to be real quiet, not to wake my grandmother up. Then I put on my walking shoes and my Matt Ryan Atlanta Falcons sports attire. Then I work up a big sweat by walking around the block 3 times as fast as I can. Then I stop take a couple of deep breaths to relax. Then I bend over, I pick up the block, and okay, and then, oh,
This
and
is
then,
a slow group,
okay,
HK.
and then, okay, and then I put the block back in the closet. Then I climb back in bed, sleep to 10. My favorite sport, my, my favorite sport is football. I've always wanted to play football, but I figure with my disabilities, I will never have the opportunity. However, a couple years ago, one day after the University of Alabama Crimson Tide beat the Tennessee Volunteers for the 11th consecutive year in football, I overheard a disgruntled Tennessee football fan say, "Our quarterback must be blind." He couldn't complete a single pass. Folks, when I heard that, I thought that's the most exciting news I'd ever heard. I thought if Tennessee's quarterback is blind, I'm blind, I can probably play quarterback on my high school football team. So, when I started 10th grade, I immediately jogged to the high school football coach's office as fast as I could. I said, "Coach, I want to try out for quarterback." Coach took one look at me, said, "HK, thanks for trying out. You are a brave young man, but you're not fast enough. You don't weigh enough. You're not tall enough. And your last name is not Manning." So, as you would expect, I didn't make the team. I didn't give up though. I was once told, your attitude determines your altitude in life. So like all you members of Grace Point, I never give up. I like to soar like an eagle chasing a busload of Southern Baptists. Then I thought to myself, I said, "HK, let's think of something that would be easy for most of you members of Grace Point to do, but would be very challenging for a blind boy to do." Then I remembered I've been riding in my grandmother's vehicle for 28 and a half years now. She makes driving seem really easy. When I heard that your senior pastor's wife, Trish Watson, drives through Douglas, Georgia, 50 in a 35-mile-an-hour speed zone while drinking McDonald's coffee and sending text messages back to the church. At the same time, I thought, since I don't drink coffee and I don't text, driving must be really easy. So I immediately enrolled in driver's education. The instructor took one look at me, said, HK, thanks for enrolling in this course. You are a brave young man. But you need a learner's permit for completion of this course. Come back when you can get one. Well, folks, as you can imagine, I hadn't been back, and I won't be going back until they invent a car that can safely drive itself. Folks, I realize we're in church today, and you expect your speakers and your ministers to always be honest and tell the truth. Well, I must apologize to you today. What I just told you is not the truth. It's a joke. With my disabilities, I cannot play football or drive a car. Where I went to school, all of us boys are blind, so we don't have a football team, much less offer driver's education. If they offered driver's ed, they'd lose all the federal funding. Plus, the accident rate in Tennessee would be a lot higher. As Romans 12:6 says, God has given each of us the ability to do certain things well. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In sports, there's small schools like Georgia Southern, if they have to play a big school, like University of Georgia or Florida in football, they would be considered the underdog, which means they are not expected to win. Well, in life, I have always been considered the underdog. What I mean by that is people tell me things I can't do without complimenting me for things that I can. When I was born, due to the accident that took my mother's life, doctors told my grandmother I probably wouldn't live long. Well, July 8th of this year, I'm gonna turn 29 years old, and I am still kicking. Doctors also told my grandmother I would probably be confined to a wheelchair. Well, I walked in here today, no need for a wheelchair. In school, teachers told my grandmother and I that I wasn't smart enough nor capable to handle a regular class load. So they were saying I wouldn't graduate high school. Well, June 1st, 2012, this little underdog pulled a major upset. I completed all the courses required of me by the state of Tennessee in order to receive a regular academic high school diploma, and I passed them all, including algebra, which was especially a challenge for a blind boy who reads and writes Braille with only the use of one hand. What I am sharing with you folks today is With God in your life, anything is possible. If you work hard, determine what your capabilities are, maintain positive attitude, you can accomplish most anything in life within your capabilities. The only disability any of us have in life is a negative attitude. So I encourage all of you to always be positive. If you are ever down, depressed, just think things can't get any worse. Just pick up the phone, call toll-free to our HK Derryberry in Columbia, Tennessee. I will give you a no charge, 100% money back guaranteed. Grace Point Church Baptist. Before I was 9 years old, my grandmother and I did not have much of a social life. We didn't have kids in the neighborhood that would play with me. Kids in the neighborhood looked at me like I was different. They were afraid of me. So when I wasn't in school, most of the time, I was at home from the time I got up in the morning until I went to bed at night, listening to radio. That can be fun some days, but also that can get to be very lonely, especially for a blind boy who is not mobile without assistance. But all that changed when I turned 9 years old. I met my good friend and mentor, Mr. Jim Bradford. I sure am glad he was an investor. He invested his time, money, and patience into me. He quickly changed my life. He let me do things normal boys my age get to do that I had never gotten to do. He became a father figure to me, which I had never really had, because my father abandoned me at age 5 for 10 years. Mr. Bradford let me borrow his eyes. What I mean by that is seeing as how I can't see. He painted word pictures for me so I could visualize things you were seeing. He told me he loved me. He told me he was proud of me. He's proud to introduce me to his friends. He told me I would be a success in life. He and his wife Brenda even buy me nice clothes so I look like other young men my age. Yes, 19 and a half years later, I sure am glad Mr. Bradford's the return on his initial investment into me has created a priceless friendship.
If any of you had gotten a phone call one morning from Chris Watson, and you answer the phone, and it says, "This is Chris," and if he was calling me, I'd say, "Oh, hey, Chris, how are you?" He'd say, "Jim, we've got a young man here in Douglas, Georgia, that needs a male influence in his life, and somebody gave me your name, And I just wondered if you have time that you could spend possibly maybe 30 minutes to an hour, maybe once a week or once a month with this young man. Now, if you got that call, probably all of you would do what I would do, and I'd say, well, Chris, I'm honored you'd call me. Sure, I'd be glad to. So it's all set. About 15 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's Chris calling back. And this time, Chris says, oh, Jim, this is Chris. I forgot to tell you the rest of the story. The young man we want you to spend time with is blind and has cerebral palsy. He requires medications every 4 hours that he's with you. He requires 4 breathing treatments a day. And he also requires eye drops or eye gel in his eyes 4 times a day. And he's very susceptible to having very serious seizures. But now if he has a seizure when he's with you, don't worry. All you have to do is keep him calm and call 911. Now, I'm not sure about you. Probably since you go to Grace Point, you wouldn't do what I would do. But I would say, Chris, I am so glad you called back. In the last 15 minutes, I've looked at my calendar, and I am so busy, I probably couldn't do it. Well, on October 16th of this year, it will have been 20 years since I would have gotten that call, because that's the day that I met HK Derryberry. What I found out that morning is that sometimes we have planned our lives out and we don't know it until that moment it happens that God has a little bit of twist in the plans that we have. The morning of October 16th of 1999, he corrects me on everything. I was playing tennis that morning like I always did with a group of buddies, and while I played tennis that morning, all I could think about was as soon as this match is over, which is unusual because normally when our match was over, we hung around the tennis courts, indoor tennis courts, for about another 30 to 45 minutes just talking family, business, whatever, cooling off. But all I could think about was going to Starbucks in Brentwood, Tennessee, where I live, and getting another cup of coffee. So when the match was over, I just immediately told the guys bye, went and got in my car, and I'm driving to Brentwood. Like all of us, this morning, some of the ladies probably had a decision to make. Do I wear dark-colored slacks or white slacks, or what kind of top do I wear today? Do I wear socks or not socks like your minister? That's a joke. But anyway, those are minor decisions. Well, when I got to the intersection, the main intersection there at the intersection of Franklin Road and Old Hickory Boulevard, if I turn right and drive exactly 1 mile, something I'd done many times before, there is a Starbucks. But I look to my left, and there's a red and white neon sign about 30 feet in the air. It says, Mrs. Winter's Chicken and Biscuits. And when the traffic light turned to green, instead of turning right and driving a mile, I turned left and drove 1/10 of a mile, pulled into a little parking lot that had more potholes than our streets in Tennessee this past winter had. Went in this grubby-looking building, red and white block building that served fried chicken. It's about 10:45 in the morning. I walk in, and the lady behind the cash register says, may I help you? I said, yes, ma'am. I'd like a cup of coffee. She said, are you 55 years old? I'm thinking, what does age have to do with coffee? And I had just come from a couple of months earlier, I had come from one of my high school class reunions where I know that I was the youngest looking male in my class. And even though I was 56, I didn't think I looked 56. But I looked behind me to see who she was speaking to, and there's nobody in line. So I had to fess up and say, yes, ma'am, I'm 55. She said, congratulations, because at our restaurant, if you're 55, you qualify as a senior, and instead of 95 cents, your coffee's only 25 cents. I said, hot dog. I said, I just lost my tennis match. That's great. What about a chicken lunch? She said, no, just coffee. How many of you have been to Starbucks ever? Okay, they are the most courteous people. And maybe they're courteous because they charge you $2 for the smallest cup of coffee. But they say, you walk in, hi, may I help you? Yes, ma'am, I'd like a cup of coffee. What's your name, Jim? Well, hi, Jim. And they write your name on the cup. I mean, so courteous. And then they say, oh, Jim, would you like room for cream? Oh, yes, ma'am. And when they get finished with your coffee, they put a lid on it. Jim, your coffee's ready. Well, at The chicken restaurant, they didn't do that. She reaches into a little cup holder and pulls out a white styrofoam cup and hands it to me and said, the coffee's over there. And there's 2 urns. One says decaf and one says regular. The only positive about it had a sign, a banner above the coffee pots, says, we serve Maxwell House coffee. Growing up, I lived with my grandparents in a rural part of North Alabama. And my grandmother always used Maxwell House coffee. And I'm thinking, well, if it's good enough for my grandparents, it must be good. So this is a good morning. Now, like you, I got ready to fix my coffee, and I don't know what you do, but basically I start out by putting 1 Splenda in and 1 little packet of cream. I stir it, I sip it. If it's not quite sweet enough, I put another maybe half pack of Splenda, and usually it's perfect. Well, I got my coffee just perfect. I put the lid on it, and I turned to leave the restaurant. At age 56, I had never stopped to talk to a person with a disability. I had seen young people before, adults or children that had Down syndrome. I'd seen them in wheelchairs, maybe with cerebral palsy, but I'd never stopped to talk to them or their families. Not that I should. I felt sorry for them, had pity for them, but what I tried to do, because they looked a little different and they caught my attention, I tried not to get caught staring at them because it would be embarrassing. And when I turned to leave with my perfect tasting cup of Maxwell House coffee, I saw for the first time a little boy sitting at a table by himself listening to a little black boombox plastic radio that had been dropped and broken at least one time because there was silver duct tape holding the batteries in. What I noticed was he needed a haircut. He had on a white T-shirt that morning. It was cold outside, the first cool autumn morning we had had that season. He had on some little, there was food stains on his shirt, maybe from breakfast or other meals that week. But what I really focused on, he had plastic braces on both legs. So I knew something was wrong with the little boy. Being an inquisitive person, I turned to the lady behind the counter, not the one who sold me the coffee, but a lady had a name badge on, said Helen. She was putting plastic utensils in a container. I said, pardon me, Helen, who's the little boy? She said, oh, that's HK. He's our sweetheart. I said, well, who's he? She said, well, the lady who sold you the coffee, her name's Pearl. That's his grandmother. She lives with him, and on weekends he comes to work with her. I said, what's he? She said, well, she can't afford a babysitter, so he comes and sits while she works. Now, HK at that point, I had not met him, but he looked to be about 5 years old. I said, how long does he sit? She said, just from 8 till 5. I said, you've got to be kidding. And I ticked Helen off big time. She said, well, he doesn't do it every day. He goes to school during the week. Well, okay, I've heard her little story, so I turned my back as I'm ready to walk right by this boy for 56 consecutive years without ever stopping to talking to a person with a disability. And she sarcastically, to my back, says, oh, yes, and he is also blind. I walked right to the table and I said, hey, buddy, what's your name?
I'm HK. What's your name?
My name is Jim, HK.
Nice to meet you.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Where do you live?
I live in Brentwood.
What street?
I live on Harpeth River Drive.
What's that off of?
It's off of Old Hickory Boulevard.
What time did you get up this
6
morning?
o'clock.
Then what did you do?
Took a shower.
Then what?
Put on my tennis
Then
clothes.
what?
Went to Green Hills to meet my tennis partners.
Then
We'll
what?
stop right there. Some of you folks are old enough to remember one of my favorite all-time movies, Groundhog Day. Phil Connors, a news reporter, gets caught in a time warp in a small town in Pennsylvania. And every morning at 6 o'clock, he wakes up and relives yesterday. The only difference is today he knows more about the people in the town than he did the day before. Well, HK could not carry on the conversation because I kept asking him questions, and he would just say, what'd you do next? What'd you do next? He couldn't answer a single question. But anyway, after about 2 minutes, I felt like I was being interrogated by the FBI. And I said, I'm thinking this is the craziest kid I've ever met. And I said, HK, it's been nice meeting you, but my wife Brenda's got a list of things I've got to accomplish this morning before I go home. So I've got to leave, but it's been nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too. Hope to see you again soon.
Well, I hope to see you again soon too, and I didn't realize what I had just done. As of today, I'd made almost a 20-year commitment to keep befriending this little boy. I got in my car, and I never forget my perfect tasting hot Maxwell House coffee. I put it in the cup holder. An hour And a few minutes later, when I get home after running Brendan's errands, I've never taken a sip of that perfect tasting coffee because all I could think about was the little boy sitting at the restaurant for 9 or 10 hours on Saturday and Sunday that had braces on his legs. So anyway, I thought about him most of the week. And next Saturday at 3 o'clock, I played tennis that morning. In the afternoon, I'm out raking leaves. And I decided I would go and check and see if he was there. I told Brenda I was actually going to get a cup of coffee, but I was really just going to see if he was there and if I could talk to him. So when I pulled into the restaurant, I looked through the window and sure enough, saw his little silhouette sitting at the same table. Walked in. This time I pulled out a chair and I sat down with him. He said, "What's your name?" I said, "I'm Jim." He said, "Are you the man I met last week?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where do you live?" "What street's that on?" "What's that off of?" And we went through that same exercise, but I stayed 20 minutes. The next Saturday, I went back again. I pulled out a chair and I sat down and we went through the same exercise. He couldn't answer my questions. The third week that I went back to visit, I started the conversation. And I said, "HK, this is the third time I've been to visit you. And I said, every time I've come, you've never answered a single question I've asked you. And if you don't start answering my questions this morning and you keep asking me, what did you do next? I said, today is the last time you'll ever see me." Well, that morning I found out how intelligent this little boy that appeared, he was 9, but he appeared to be 5 years old, how intelligent he was, because guess what? He's never asked me the what next questions ever. And he started talking to me for the first time. I kept visiting with him for a while, and then his grandmother, who had no social life at all because all she had to do was go home at night after work or picking him up after work after school and going home with a blind boy that can only say, "Grammy, what'd you do today? How much chicken did you serve?" Maybe. I'm not sure what they talked about, but, that was the extent of her social. Anyway, long story short, when I would pull into the parking lot to visit him, she would take her break, and she would sit with us because she loved to talk. Well, when she started talking, I started listening and no longer did I ask questions because she answered all the ones I needed to know, I guess. And here's what I found out by listening to Pearl, his grandmother. I found out that he has cerebral palsy and is blind, not because of birth defects. He was born at 28 weeks. 27 weeks, 3 months premature, all because of the lifestyle of two people, his 19-year-old mother and his 26-year-old father. They weren't married. They had been together for 8 months, and on July the 7th of 1990, Mary, his 19-year-old mother, was 6 months pregnant. Mary grew up in a home that probably had multiple fathers or stepfathers. Her mother was an over-the-road trucker at the time, and 13 and 12 and 14-year-old daughters need the attention and affection of parents, especially mothers. Mary probably didn't have it because when she was 14 years old in the 7th grade, on her own accord, she dropped out of school. William lived in Murray County, Tennessee, with his grandparents while his mother, who the father had left the family when William was 2 years old in Chicago, stole the family car and left. He's being raised now by grandparents that didn't have a boy. They're older, just had a girl. And the mother's living 50 miles in Nashville away, working to make a living to support the son, and about every other Saturday she might come back to visit him. He probably needed the same attention from a father that he didn't get. So 26-year-old William, when he was in the 10th grade in school, he liked the lifestyle of his buddies better than education or his parents' direction. He drops out of school, but his buddies were into petty theft, they were into drugs, and were in alcohol. So here you've got two dysfunctional families, two dysfunctional people living together, and Mary is 19 years old and expecting a baby. So William, who, when he dropped out of school, assured himself of minimum wage paying jobs the rest of his life. He's baling hay on a Saturday. He's going to work 10 hours and make $50 cash. Mary, about 3 o'clock, realizes that when he gets that cash money that night at the bar where they're going to go have fun, he's going to put them at the top of the income scale until the money runs out. So about 3 o'clock, she gets, I'm fictionalizing this because this is what I've been told, but she gets up and gets dressed and gets ready. She drives to the farm to pick up William. She's probably dolled up in her best makeup and best clothes she has. And William comes out on her way there. She stops and fills at a convenience store and fills a cooler full of ice and beer. And I'm imagining after he's been out in the sun, 95-degree weather on July 7th, he's probably thirsty, tired, hungry, dehydrated. And when she gets there and opens the trunk and shows him the beer, he probably gives her a high five, maybe even hugged her, even though he's sweaty and hot. But anyway, I wasn't there, but I assume they consumed all the beer in the cooler. When they're finished, they close the cooler, close the trunk, and he drives back for him to get cleaned up. Now, on the way back, he's got his seatbelt buckled. Mary, maybe because she's pregnant, she doesn't. Maybe because she wanted to sit closer to William, she doesn't have the seatbelt on. They're on a strip of highway that is 1 mile in length without a hill or a curve, and there's nobody that they can see behind them or in front of them, and he loses control of the car, runs off the road, and hits a oak tree head on. He suffers a cut lip. He suffers a bruised sternum. Nothing serious. Mary is ejected from the vehicle, and when paramedics eventually arrive, they realize that she has severe head trauma and is basically brain dead. They also discovered that she's pregnant and the baby is still living, so they call Vanderbilt Medical Center 50 miles away. They send a helicopter to pick up her body, and they keep her on life support overnight. Next morning at 5:30, they've been able to get in touch with her mother, Rosemary. She's at the hospital, and when I told you that morning that I had the choice of turning right, driving a mile to get the coffee, or driving 1/10 of a mile to the left and getting coffee, that was a very minor decision. Well, Rosemary is given a major decision. The doctor said, Mrs. Moon, your daughter has suffered severe head trauma. She will not survive. We have her on life support till you make your decision. Then we're going to cut the equipment off. Your grandson is still living, and we can deliver him, but we don't think he will live. But if we do deliver him, he'll probably have medical issues the rest of his life. So what's your choice? And thank God she made the decision she did that morning, or we wouldn't be your speakers today. Now, she didn't say deliver the baby. What she said, quote, with someone standing next to her, she said, salvage what you can.
Delivered.
Well, HK will be 29 years old, 29 years old. On July the 8th, I'm aging him fast. And the grandmother that said deliver the baby has never seen her grandson because she never came back. His other grandmother has raised him. William's mother has raised him, and she's told me so many times, I want to be a better mother to HK than I was to his father. Now, that's the way he started life. Spent 96 days in neonatal intensive care. While he was there, there was a valve in his heart that wouldn't close. They had to do surgery on a 2-pound baby. He wasn't strong enough, so they put him on pure oxygen. Now, he wouldn't be blind probably today because medical science has changed. But they left him too long on the pure oxygen. The surgery was successful, but his retinas didn't develop. Halfway through the study, he had a brain bleed one day. They thought they lost him, but they didn't. He had a stroke and cerebral palsy. Now, that's the way he started life. You're meeting today, you're hearing the most positive little guy you'll ever meet, I'm sure, in your life. And that's who I met that Saturday morning, October 16th of 1999. Now, we've had lots of fun together. We've been so blessed. I'll tell you just a little bit about our speaking. In the last 30 months, believe this or not, because it blows my mind, we have never advertised, but we have spoken to over 50,000 people in 24 states plus the Grand Cayman Islands through word of mouth. We have a website. How many of you do Facebook? You can help us today. hkderryberry.com. Go to his website, like his fan page. When we started this morning, we needed 28 people to have 12,000 followers. So help us out before the day's over. Like his fan page. Let's get over 12,000. Anyway, we've just been so blessed to be invited to speak. A few years ago, we spoke at a Methodist church, one of our very first speaking engagements, about 7 or 8 years ago. And a friend of mine came who is a motivational speaker by career. And next morning, he met me for breakfast and said, I made some notes. He had about 6 pages of a 14-inch pad. I'm thinking it must have been terrible, but it was all constructive. And the last thing when we met, he said, what's your fee? I said, beg your pardon? He said, what's your fee? I said, what do you mean? He said, how much do y'all charge to speak? I said, well, we don't charge anything. HK just loves talking to groups. He said, you are dumb. And HK, every time I bring that up, he said, Mr. Bradford, you are dumb. But anyway, he said, you should be charging. So the next time we got a call from somebody to come speak, I was so nervous. The guy said, what's your fee? And I was just so embarrassed, and I just kind of mumbled it. He said, I didn't hear you on the phone. I said it again. He said, oh, my gosh. Yeah, we pay normally 5 times that much. We'll have you guys come. I knew I'd made a mistake. So then HK said, Mr. Bradford, you're not handling that correctly. So the next time I asked, I said, do you have a budget for your speakers? And he said yes. And matter of fact, the amount was $10,000. I said, oh, my gosh. I said, you're going to love us because we're not $10,000 speakers. We hope we get to that level someday, but here's what we do it for. And they said, oh, my gosh, we'll have you back 5 times. So anyway, we've been speaking, and everything he earns speaking goes into a special needs trust for his future long-term care. So anyway, the memory he's got, sir with the glasses on, sitting there with your arm around either a cute girl or your wife. When is your birthday? When is your birthday? November what? November 5th, 1952.
That was on a Wednesday. That was a presidential election day in '68. On that day, Richard Nixon was elected president, and in '96 on that day, Bill Clinton was reelected president. And in 2009 that day, there was a terrorist attack shooting in Fort Hood, Texas, at military base, killed 30-something people, and Obama called it workplace violence.
Okay. HK has this unbelievable memory, okay? He's one of 11 people in the world that has been studied medically. It said in the video 2, but that was done a few years ago. There's 11 people today that have been studied medically. It has a condition called hyperthymesia. He remembers anything he hears. Now, if you tell him later after service, if you give him your birthday and we come back in a couple of years,
I'll remember it.
He will not remember your birthday, but he will remember the time, the temperature, all the other things surrounding it, but he won't remember the actual date, more than likely. But anyway, he has a special, wonderful gift of memory, and for some of his very close friends, it's so special because in the 19 and a half years we've been buddies, I have never forgotten our anniversary. I've never forgotten my daughter's birthdays and the grandkids' birthdays because every morning when he wakes up, and he, unlike all of us, he doesn't stretch and yawn. As soon as I say, HK, good morning, he's up sitting on the edge of the bed and said, Mr. Bradford, let me tell you what happened today 17 years ago. And he tells me all the things that happened on this day a few years ago. And then he says, oh, by the way, did you know that Chris Watson's birthday is Thursday and somebody else's birthday is next Tuesday? We better get him a card. So I spend about $30 a month on buying birthday cards for him to send to his buddies. But anyway, we've just had a great time. I know our time's up. I hope you don't mind my taking a few more minutes to share a few more stories about our story. But the first time I asked his grandmother if I could take him away from the restaurant, she said, oh, I think I can trust you. So I took him to, how many of you have been to Home Depot before? I took him to a Home Depot store. At that time, he weighed about not quite 55 pounds, and he was 9 years old. But I just picked him up, put him in the basket, and us guys, we're pretty macho. When we go, we don't ask for help from the guys in the orange aprons. We just know where stuff is. And so when we got there, he said, Mr. Bradford, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for some light bulbs that go in an outdoor security system. He said, you know where they are? I said, I do. They're on aisle 30. So I go down, I push the buggy down to aisle 30, and it's building materials. Aisle 29 is gutters and roofing, and I don't remember what 20, but it wasn't light bulbs for a security system. Finally, a guy in an orange apron walks up and says, hey, boys, look like you could use some help. I said, I'm looking for bulbs to go in an outdoor security system. He said, you're on the wrong end of the store. That's aisle 2. And HK said,
that's like the blind leading the blind.
So I knew that he had personality as well as being smart. But anyway, the memory has been just for some of his close friends, it can be just wonderful because, like I say, I don't forget birthdays. Traveling with him is like having your own secretary or Rolodex file. He just keeps telling you, and he just keeps correcting me. And so that's wonderful. It also can be, with his memory, can be very embarrassing to some of his close friends, and I'll give you a couple of examples. We took him one night after church with us, because we used to go out years ago with adults only. All of us were empty nesters. All our kids were grown out of college and moved away from home. And one weekend, one Sunday, he was watching a ball game, and so I called his grandmother when she got off from work, and the ball game wasn't over. I said, let's just let him go to church with us, and I'll bring you home tonight. Well, usually this group of adults would go out to a fast food restaurant after church and just have hamburgers and reminisce for an hour or two. Well, we took HK with us. Well, that night, HK was about this much shorter than the counter at this hamburger restaurant called Backyard Burger. And what you do is you place your order at one window, they give you a number, you take it to a table, and then they call your number, you go to another window and get your food. Well, when we got up to the window that night, it was really crowded on a Sunday night about 7:15. The man behind the counter taking the orders looked over the counter and said, "Pardon me, HK, is that you?"
Yeah, what's your name?
"I'm Stanley."
Are you the one that worked at Miss Winters or my grandmother?
"Yes, I worked at Franklin Road, Mrs. Winters, with your grandmother Pearl for about 3 years."
Are you the one that got fired for smoking marijuana?
True story. Brenda looked at me and said, "Did he say what I think he did?" I said, "He did." She said, "Order and let's get out of here." People were laughing so hard they'd turned their back to us. But Stanley was a good sport. He said, "That was me, HK, but I learned my lesson. I don't do that anymore." And then talked about liking sports. You noticed in the video he meets sports people. He's tried out for the football team and all that stuff. Well, in Nashville, we have the Titans, and we've been so blessed because we have met a lot of sports figures. How many of you have ever heard of Alan Jackson from here in Georgia? Any of you ever been on his tour bus? Been his guest at the Grand Ole Opry? Okay, he has. Ricky Skaggs. Anybody like Ricky Skaggs? Anybody know Ricky Skaggs? Anybody been to the Opry as a guest of Ricky? Okay. He's pretty famous around Nashville. Well, anyway, we met some of the Titans. And Kevin, who played football at LSU, he was an All-American. He was a second-round draft choice. He was a center, and he was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks, where he played 6 years. Then he was traded to the New York Jets, where he played. And then the last 4 years of his 16-year career was spent in Nashville as the starting center for the Titans. And so he bought a farm in Williamson County right next door to a farm owned by friends of ours. And so one Saturday in 2006, after the season had already started, the Titans had played 6 games already, and they had a game tomorrow against Detroit, but their record was 1 win and 5 losses. Probably the coaches were getting a little nervous. But anyway, my phone rings about 11 o'clock in the morning at Chick-fil-A in Brentwood, and it's Doug Durr, my friend that's got the farm next to Kevin Mawai. "Hey, Jim, this is Doug. What are you and HK doing?" "We're having lunch at Chick-fil-A." He said, "Could you bring him out here when y'all finish? Kevin's going to come over about lunchtime, about noon. He's got to be back down to Titans for tomorrow's game about 3 o'clock, but he wants to meet HK." So we go out. Walking across the pasture is Kevin Mawai. Now, I had seen players, professional players, that are retired, and they seem to lose a lot of their bulk, muscles, and, sometimes weight after they retire. And I had not necessarily personally in person met a current player. But here comes Kevin and his wife Stacy across the pasture. They come in. Kevin is only 6'2", 295 pounds, and has less than 3% body fat. I have never seen a human so big. And he comes in to meet 64-pound, 4'9" HK Derryberry. And they hold hands, and in about 5 minutes they've bonded. I assume, even though it was a little up in the fall after 6 games, it must have been allergy season, because Kevin said, after holding his hand for a couple minutes, "Anybody have a Kleenex?" And his eyes were watering. And but anyway, they bonded real quickly, and before Kevin had to go to pack up to go down to the facility for the walkthrough for tomorrow's game, he said, "HK, have you ever been to a Titans game?"
I've been to a preseason game, not a regular season.
How would you like to go to regular season?
I would love to.
How would you like to sit in the skybox with my family?
Oh, I would love to. Kevin, are any of the games sold out?
Well, yes, HK. All the Titans games are sold out.
I don't know why, because y'all aren't any good.
And 6'2", 295-pound, 3% body fat Kevin Mawai said, HK, you're exactly right. We stink. He said, but when I get back to the facility, I'm going to call all the offensive linemen together and tell them what you said. Well, do you know he must have done that because the season ended after starting 5 losses and 1 win. They wound up 8-8. And every time they'd win a game, you know what? HK would say, Mr. Bradford, do you think it was due to the pep talk I gave Kevin? And it must have been. Kevin is going to be inducted in August of this year in the NFL Pro Hall of Fame. And it's quite an honor. After they beat the Indianapolis Colts one year, and we were in the skybox. We got to go to games, and it was so special sitting in a skybox. The last play of the game, the Titans kicked a 60-yard field goal to win the game by 3 points. Anyway, we're in the skybox. The game's ended. Kevin comes up 30 minutes later. He's just gotten out of the shower. His hair is still wet, and his T-shirt's sticking to his body, and he's got something under his arm. He comes in, and HK says, Kevin, did you know y'all kicked a 60-yard field goal, won the game? Kevin said, well, HK, I think so. I was out there. I snapped the ball. And anyway, everybody was laughing, and then Kevin said, HK, because of the day's victory, our coach gave us our game jerseys, and I want you to have mine. And so he gave HK the game jersey. It had grass stains, had a little tear on the shoulder. Anyway, I had the jersey dry cleaned. I've got the 2 tickets. I have a picture of HK and Kevin, and he's in the jersey, and he's got on a visor, and there's big old Kevin standing behind him. And I haven't done it yet, but the jersey now is probably worth a lot of money since he's a Hall of Famer, but I'm going to have it framed in one of the boxes. I've got the tickets, the picture, and the jersey. Pretty neat. But anyway, we have been so blessed. It's just unbelievable that we continue to get people that want us to come and share our story. And I know I'm going way over, but they told me this service it didn't matter. But we got a call a couple of years ago from the Grand Cayman Islands, and there's an accounting firm called Ernst & Young, and they're one of the, I guess, big 3 today rather than one of the big 4. But anyway, they invited us to come, and we were the keynote speakers for their 11th annual Global Hedge Fund Symposium. There were 250 people from 11 countries. Except for us, everybody spoke more than 1 language. Except for us, everybody had at least 6 initials following their name, and we were the keynote speakers. And I guess we did a good enough job that last year they invited us to come to Minneapolis. And last year we were the keynote speakers for the 9th annual Global Alternative Fund Symposium. And we were the only people there that didn't have at least 6 letters following their name. So I'm thinking we've kind of hit the pinnacle of speaking. We've been in Seattle. We've been in just, you name the states. It's just amazing. We spoke, surprisingly, twice at the University of Georgia. And I thought that was pretty special that they invited us back. So they must have liked us. And typically when we speak, somebody hears us and they tell somebody, and then we eventually get an invitation or an inquiry. So anyway, we've been very blessed. I think I mentioned that the earnings that HK does get goes into a special needs trust. We've never written a check or anything of the money. It'll be there for his future long-term care, because with his disabilities, he gets from the government, and his basically only relative is his grandmother, who's now 73 or 4.
She is 74.
74. Don't drool. He gets $700 a month from the government. And can you imagine how he could live comfortably on $700 a month if he has no other support. And as he gets older, sometimes we get letters saying that his insurance, TennCare in Tennessee, has taken this drug away. And not long ago, we got a little thing that said his little inhaler where he takes 2 breathing treatments a day, they said they were no longer going to pay for that. That little device costs $350 and lasts less than 60 days. And that's half of what he gets to live on. And I'm thinking, this isn't fair, you know. But anyway, long story short, we spoke at Blue Cross Blue Shield at a major meeting, and the chairman wanted us to come and meet with 20 of the top executives following our talk. And they asked HK lots of questions about, you know, your health care. What do you like in the, you know, the doctors and the nurses? What part do you like? What part could we improve on? And I brought up the fact that we'd just gotten a letter with this little inhaler taking half of his money away. And they said, well, HK, I think we can fix that. Within 24 hours, whatever they did with the state of Tennessee, he still gets his medicine and no longer buys it. So it's nice to like people. Now, that's our story. We have a lot more funny stories. Last time we were here, we brought books. We have a great book. We didn't bring any this time just because of logistics, and yesterday I had some other things I had to attend to right before we got to the airport. If you'd like a book and to hear more of his stories or read more about it, go to Amazon.com, and all you have to do is type in H.K. Derryberry, and the book pops up. And it's available in a paperback, and you can have it in 2 days. And would love for you to order a book. You'll like the story. At least that's what people tell us. Most people tell us it's one of the best books they've ever read. In 2017, our book got, of all books that year that are on audio tape, our book was selected the #1 audio book, nonfiction, faith-based book. It got the book of the year. And so it's been really special for us. And you never know. People say, will there ever be a movie? We don't know.
Yes, there will.
HK said, he says, yes, there will be. And I think he wants Tom Hanks to play him.
And Whoopi Goldberg to play my grandmother.
Whoopi Goldberg. Boy, that's good, HK. You haven't seen Whoopi Goldberg. Well, he hadn't seen his grandmother either, so I guess it doesn't matter. But we're going to leave you this morning. This has been so much fun. HK told me last night, Gene picked us up. He and his wife, Linda, picked us up at the airport and left us for a few minutes. And then some cousins he really didn't know came from where? Sylvester. All the way over in Sylvester. They came to visit. They went to lunch with us, and they came back this morning to hear us this morning at the first service. And they're taking vacation today, but they came here going back before they leave for their vacation. I thought that was pretty neat. And so anyway, but he said last night, said, Mr. Bradford, this was the most fun night of my whole life. And I'm sure here in a couple of hours when we go back to Nashville, he's going to say, Mr. Bradford, this will be the best day of my life. Now, when we finish this, hey, who said that? Oh, hey.
Who is that?
Well, it's a young lady. Do you have cerebral palsy? Yes, 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 yes. Well, make sure you come up and meet HK.
Yeah.
And we want you to go. Gene, are we going to lunch? We want you to go to lunch with us. Can you? Can you? Okay. I've got a gift for you, too. Okay? All right, that's special. Anyway, ladies, if you'd like to know the day of the week you were born, are we singing another song? No, we're going to leave HK sitting right here. You can come up and meet HK if you don't mind giving him the year. Now, we have a 93-year-old lady that goes to church with us. For the last 20 years, HK has asked her every time he sees her. This is the running joke at our church. She's also 4'10", so they're the same height. And he will go up and say, Doris, when is your birthday? Now, this has been going on for 20 years. And she says, HK, can you keep a secret? And he says, yes. She said, well, so can I. But if you don't mind giving HK your birthday, he'll tell you the year that you were born and any other historical facts. Ladies,
I am
you can. How much do you charge now for photographs? I'm kidding. But if you want to make pictures, you can. All this stuff. He's going to tell you though, if you like him, he's going to say, "I'm adoptable." Now, so it'll cost me less money to go back to Tennessee by myself if y'all want to keep him. But anyway, we've enjoyed being here. We're going to leave you with a couple of things this morning. One is the only disability any of us have in life is a negative attitude. Another one is it's never too late to believe. And here's a little boy that nobody, the teachers even used to say he can't take a regular class load because he's not smart enough and he's too slow and he'll hinder the class. But he graduated from high school with a regular high school diploma. Unbelievable. He became the first student in the 50-year history of the school to learn to use a Braille machine with one hand. If he hadn't have done that, one teacher took 2 years when he was 5 and 6 years old to teach him to do that. Nobody else has ever done it since he graduated. Because of that, he reads and writes Braille, so he's literate. That's why he was able to graduate school. He goes snow skiing. He's been to Colorado 6 years snow skiing by himself. Well, not with me. I've never been with him. Just unbelievable that he can snow ski. He's flown an airplane. And he says he didn't hit anything, but he was accused coming back of dozing off and hitting 2 buzzards. And then the last thing I mentioned at the last service is that I heard not long ago something that stuck with me, and it says, it's not where you're from, but it's where you're going in life. Sometimes to get to where we're going in life, there's crooks and all kinds of things to get us there, and sometimes you have to recalibrate your GPS and maybe take a different path. And I said this morning, if anybody's here this morning that needs to reset their GPS, Chris is here, and you can come down front and tell him what you need, where you want to go, and he's going to help you set that GPS. Thank you so much for having us. God bless you. And we hope that one of these days in a couple of years when you get your new building, that you'll invite us back, not necessarily to speak, but just to be here the day that you dedicate that building. We would be so honored.
Before.
Do what?
If not
before. I'm sorry.
I want to be back soon.
Okay. Thank you all so much. God bless you.
Did good. I knocked them dead.
Jim, y'all want to stay up here? You can if you want to. Yeah, just stay up here. So we've had a great time with Jim and HK and just keeping up with each other on social media. They would love for you to keep up with them. Obviously, they're going to be here at the end of the service. Would love to meet you. And HK is very sociable, likes to meet people. So I'm going to close with a prayer, and then you guys hang around and just come love on Jim and HK. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your grace and mercy toward us, and just a story of inspiration, of overcoming, of community, of love, and of grace. And so just thank you for just a wonderful day in your presence, being able to worship you, but also to celebrate life that you give us. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.